The Last of Us Part 2 was announced this year at PSX, and we are talking about it. But first, we're talking about The Last of Us Part 1 and the grounded documentary that talks all about how that magic came together. Stay with us.
Welcome to Popcorn Talk, featuring movie discussion, news, and interviews. Popcorn Talk. We talk movie. And now, here's Popcorn Talk's video game movie anatomy.
I kept waiting for it.
You just want to listen to the song.
I kept waiting for it, right? I was like,
listen to the song.
I was waiting for it to hit. What is up? Welcome to Video Game Anatomy. My name is Patrick Dees. I'm one of your hosts. I am joined, as always, by the lovely and talented Mrs. Stacey Shuttles.
Hi guys, I'm Stacey Shuttleworth.
Shuttleworth.
You can find me. That's okay. That's my Twitter handle. It's
I know.
Stacey Shuttles.
I was so excited about this the Twitter handle. Sorry, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Stacey Shuttles, or on Twitter and all over the web at Nerds Doing Stuff. Because I'm a nerd doing stuff.
True story. You are a nerd doing stuff. You can find me at Peter the Dees, and please tweet at us. We want to know. This is a game and a movie that's very near and dear to our hearts, so we want to hear from you. We are sans Mark this week. It's just you and I. Which is all right. If you ask me, I think you and I are the ones that typically we are the long-winded ones.
We got plenty to talk about.
We have a lot to say. This game is something magic, and the documentary is something really, really neat too.
It really is. It was a fun documentary.
So
Interesting documentary.
What, did you find it interesting? Well, so a little fun fact, a little behind, inside baseball, if you will. Mark wasn't going to be here this week. We scheduled this one a long time out. He's like, Dees, would you mind kind of like opening us out? And I'm like, fuck it, we're talking about The Last of Us because I talk about it every week on this show regardless. Grounded, I think, is one of the most fascinating, I think, and inside and candid looks at the making of the video game, of making video games, of what goes on at Naughty Dog and kind of how this all came together. So we had planned this, a month and a half
Easily.
out.
Yeah.
And then this week at PSX, they announced Last of Us Part 2, which was unbelievable.
Timing.
Right?
Perfect.
Look at this. I know. I feel like it was meant to be. We were meant to talk about this. Yeah, were you watching PSX live, by the way?
I did not catch that live.
Okay.
But I saw the uproar, like, as soon as it happened.
Threw me for a loop because that press conference opened, and we're going to get to the documentary, don't worry. But the press conference opened, and they opened with the Uncharted game, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think when there'd been rumors, I'd heard rumors that we were actually going to be having kind of a Last of Us Part 2. They opened with that Uncharted game, which took Last of Us off the board for me. There's no way Naughty Dog was going to open and close that conference. And yet, I know, speechless. It was quite a way to end it. Unfortunately, I think it is a ways off. We're stuck. I say stuck with. We got to play we're lucky enough to play The Last of Us again. We're lucky enough to kind of watch documentaries like this again. For those of you who've seen the show several times, we have a bit of a format. Sometimes we have like what we call the speed run, where we have this back of the box quote, and we play some fun games where we cast, where we talk about favorite lines. We're gonna take all that and throw it out the window. That is not the show. It's hard to do with a documentary. We've got other kind of segments, but more or less, I just kind of wanted to get a sense of. Let's talk about The Last of Us. Let's talk about how this game
You've been waiting
came to be. I have been.
For a long time.
Well, I know it sounds ridiculous, but we end up. I think it's contrary to my nature, right? Like I like liking things. People listen to Pixel by Pixel. Like I'm generally up on most things. My co-hosts give me a lot of shit on that show. Like, oh really? You like this game too? Great. Your top 5 at the end of the year is like 40 games. And so I genuinely like liking things. I think this game is in rarefied air, and in fact, I think we'll get to. I talk about games a lot, and when I talk about them, one of the things that I tell people as a grown-ass man who plays a lot of video games and spends a lot of time in the video game industry, I say that like there has been a renaissance in video game narrative. I think this is where like studios and people are actually taking risks, and I think this is one of those things that I can kind of point to, which is best in class in any medium, regardless, be it book, television, movie, game. I think this narrative is one of the more impactful things that I've ever been able to experience. So I look for any excuse to talk about it on this show, that's for sure. It's kind of like the gold standard. I hold everything to. Before we get into the movie, talk to me a little bit about what your experience is with The Last of Us. How did you play it? Like, how didn't you play it?
I did not play it well.
Okay.
So The Last of Us, I was into it from the moment I found out that it was going to be a thing.
Sure.
I was like, all right, I'm getting this as soon as it comes out. I'm playing this. This is going to be great. This is like zombies, but not.
Sure.
And it's kind of post-apocalyptic, like, which is totally my thing. I'm there.
Yeah.
And I start playing, and it's like, no, you have to sneak. No, you have to keep sneaking. No, you cannot run out into the middle of the room and try to kill it. You are going to be instantly killed.
Yeah.
And it's not going to change the second time or the third time or
Nope.
the fourth time. And you sneak through this entire game. And I just can't do that.
So you're not also, no. I'm not much of a stealth gameplay. I think this game, luckily enough, offers enough options that I can kind of Forrest Gump my way through it.
But so I can't, and here's the thing, I don't mind stealth sometimes.
Okay.
I played half of Skyrim sneaking around the cities.
All
but I
right.
had the choice to sneak or to run in guns blazing. Or
Right.
arrows
Sure.
in this case. And also I'm pretty bad at aiming with like pistols and gun. It does not work in any format for me.
And this game's particularly, I don't want to say bad, but I think what it does that, like, Joel is not an expert marksman, and that's represented in the mechanics.
Yeah.
It is-
Shaky, you don't have good aim. It's
No.
Just, oh no.
And it is literally in real life. I don't know if have you shot a pistol before in real
No,
life?
I
I
have
can't
not.
hit anything
Yeah.
from like 8 feet.
I don't think I would be
You'd
able
be
to.
relatively safe right here if I had a pistol, Stacey. Yeah, and so it's reflected in the mechanics. So if you already don't feel really comfortable in kind of that third person, cover mechanic.
It was just embarrassing. And I can tell you the exact moment when I was just like, no, I'm done. I can't.
What was it? Where'd you give up?
So, pretty early on, too. Oh, my God. So
let me stop you there. If you're watching this and you haven't played Last of Us and you haven't seen this documentary, please shut us off and go do both of those things. We are going to get a little spoilery here today. I think we may keep some of it high level, but we may not. I mean, I think this is a game that is about the ending. It's about the last 5 minutes of the game for sure, but a big part of it is that journey. So I think just if you're watching this, just heads up, we're going to jump into everything that is Last of Us. So with that being said, where in the game did you get stuck?
So it's after you pick up Ellie and after you're traveling and you get to this grand museum as you're on your way to her drop-off point. And
It's where you're splitting off from Tess.
Yeah.
Right? Yep.
and it's you have to sneak through this giant museum. And it's pretty open floor.
Sure.
So what that means for me, especially the first few times, is I'm wandering around in circles.
Okay.
Because I have a terrible sense of direction at this point.
Fair enough.
And
In real life or just in this game?
oh, anywhere.
Yeah, okay, you mean
Anywhere.
both. And there's
In
no
both.
GPS weirdly enough in this. Yeah, no, totally,
But
gotcha.
especially in this game.
Fair
this
enough.
this game was not good. And so like I would take a step into a room and all of a sudden it would be like, you're dead. I'm like, what?
Right.
What?
And violently, you're not just dead, you're like
Violently,
super
you are
dead.
watching yourself
Yeah,
get
it's-
torn apart.
That is not
like
a pretty picture.
viciously.
Yep.
And so I think I made it almost all the way through the museum.
Okay.
And I just hit this point and I handed the controller to my husband. And I was like, yeah, no, you play. I can't do it. I can't.
But at that point, were you invested in the Joel and Ellie narrative? Like, did you care about how it finished, or where were you at that point when you finally just handed the controller
I was
back?
still interested in watching the game, watching how it played out. I mean, it's obviously a very different experience not being the one behind the controller.
Sure.
But I did like to see the way their relationship evolved, and just, I mean, how the morals of that entire world worked
Yep.
too was fascinating.
Yep.
So I absolutely wanted to keep knowing what happened.
Of
I
course.
just did not want to be the one sneaking through
I don't blame
hours
you. And
of it.
I think that I think something's a little lost if you're not. I think you literally could cut out most of the gameplay in this game, and it's unique in that sense. I think it serves a point, and I think it shows the levels of desperation in this world, and it definitely does a lot of just world building in general. But I literally, and I haven't done it, but I think you literally could watch just all of the cutscenes. I think they total 3 hours, and you get a very fleshed out arc for these two.
That's how it goes.
So this was on your radar early. You were a Naughty Dog fan. You were like an Uncharted girl. You like loved.
I go back to Jack and Daxter.
I'm sorry, you're, like,
All right?
representing-
Like
all
no,
right.
that's
All right.
and
So
in
you
the
knew.
documentary when they're like, we were almost going to do Jack and Daxter. I was like, excuse me.
Yeah. You're
Hold
like,
on.
Oh wait, I got this instead of a Jack and Daxter.
What?
Ah.
Man.
So you were like, so this was on your radar from kind of early on.
Yes.
It's interesting. I was an Xbox kid. I didn't have a PlayStation. I felt like
Okay.
I know, which is unfathomable at this point. Like again, being a guy, like again, I'm console agnostic, but I think for a long time it really made sense just for me to have an Xbox. That's where my friends are. People ask me all the time, where do you play? Play where your friends are. I had a 360. I didn't have a PlayStation 3 at the time. when this came out, and my cousin who hosts Pixel by Pixel with me literally brought his console over to my house, dropped it on the floor. He'd finished it. He was day one, like, again, marathoned it, finished it in like 2-3 days, brought me the console and said, just play it. I'm not going to tell you anything about it. And I never played at this point an Uncharted game, and we've gone on record about our love just for Naughty Dog and everything they do. Literally, I went into this game totally blind. Man, I am glad. I tell you what. So I knew this was a big deal for me when, the opening, and if you, again, we're all spoilers here at this point, the opening where Joel loses his daughter. It's that first 20 minutes, I think even before the actual title screen, right?
Yeah,
like it just opens up on that. So I don't know, 8:30, 9 o'clock at night, I'd ordered some food, I started playing, and I finished that section and was very rattled. And immediately my doorbell rang. Bird's Chicken, if you're familiar with them, shout out to Birds on Franklin. The guy showed up and he's like, whatever, he's seen me 100 times. I order a lot of food, okay, no judgment.
No judgment.
So I had ordered some food, and so I had my headphones around my neck, and he's like, "What's going on, man? What are you playing? Like, you all right?" And so I was like, "Just come inside." This guy's like, "All right." So I literally sat the guy on my couch, started that whole section over. Dude was super late for the rest of his deliveries, but he just didn't care. He was like, again, because it's so like, so I had to relive that scene twice, which we'll get to again later. But I knew it was something special, and I needed somebody to share it with, like, right away, So yeah, immediately I was like, this is something special. It did. This game's something else. So very cool. Let's talk a little bit about the actual documentary. We're talking about Grounded, the making of The Last of Us. Normally, this is the point in the show where we would go. We do our speed run. You and I decided not to do a speed run because there's no back of the box for this documentary.
Particularly,
we talked a little bit about. I don't know. Maybe how would you pitch your friend if you've got a video game fan who's a friend? Like, what do you do to say to get them to watch this? Because I don't know that it's on a lot of people's radar. Like, did you know about it, or?
No, I didn't, honestly, until you started talking about it. And then I was like, oh, they made a documentary about that.
Sure.
It's probably going to be pretty gritty and kind of talking about this really kind of dark world.
Yep.
So I think, honestly, the way I would sell it to anyone after watching it is the fact that you see this kind of horrific, morally gray, raw world come from such a tender and, like, loving place.
Sure.
Which was just all through the documentary. Was just how much, like, devotion and care was put into it.
Absolutely. I would watch that if you'd said that. Like, again, your pitch was successful. It worked. Yeah, I think this is, I think my pitch would be to anybody who's interested in learning how stories come together, and especially, anything in this medium, to get an understanding of how all of it kind of comes together and how late it all comes together and the sacrifices that people make to bring these experiences to us. I think it's magic. I genuinely do. I know I'm this professional appreciator, but this spoke at the beginning of the show. This is where people are telling interesting stories, and this is one of the most interesting kind of standalone stories, which we'll get to in a minute on the whole part 2 and how we feel about that. But that would be my pitch. Like, if you appreciate stories or people who are passionate, who are committed to excellence, watch this documentary. Would you watch that?
I would watch that. And
I was worried. I don't know.
And that was absolutely true about this. I've never really seen a documentary that goes that, like, honestly into what it takes and to what comes together and how.
Sure.
I mean, they kind of showcased every little corner of what you need to make this come together.
Did you think that they portrayed the process honestly? Do you think they were candid in all of it? Because ostensibly it is a commercial for the game, right? Like, if you think about it as a marketing piece, I'm sure Sony paid for this.
Well,
How honest did it feel to you?
I mean, it was a little more happy-go-lucky, I think, and especially since we did Indie the game recently.
Right.
And there was a lot of despair in that. And I have, that happened with this game too, but they did not show it. So I guess it kind of painted a little unrealistic of exactly the experiences they probably felt.
Well, so, and I think that's when I almost called you in the middle of this. So I think the moment for me that I was like, this would have been in my controller toss if we kept that. So again, later on the show, we would normally talk about this moment in a video game movie where we're like, come on, we wing our controller across the desk. You don't do that in a documentary, except
Well,
when that guy literally looked straight in the camera and he looked at it and he said, "Oh, I love crunch. I love that sense when we're all here 16, 17 hours a day." I was like, there's no way. Like, I don't care who you are. Like, a lot of dev friends. Nobody likes crunch. It is unfortunately part of the industry, but like, I think that was one of those. If I had a controller to throw, that's where I would be winging it.
that'd be it. Oh, there was one great shot. They were just kind of talking about generally animating and putting things together.
Yeah.
And you just see and like someone hard at work at their desk and just like 7 or 8 cups of coffee.
I believe that.
Lined up on the desk and someone dropping off a fresh one.
Yeah, sure.
It was just like, oh yeah, that's what they're in for right now. That's what's happening there.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Like,
that is not all sunshine and rainbows.
It wasn't, and it was a little dark too when they were talking about that crunch. I think it was that weird juxtaposition. He was saying, "I love crunch, it's the best," and then they showed that woman sleeping at the office. That is nobody's idea of a good time.
Oh, that was not the best.
I've slept in an office. Nobody enjoys that. I'm just saying. I would have liked him. The guy goes, I would have liked him to say, crunch is terrible and it makes for a dumpster fire of a work environment, but we put out an amazing game, so we're all happy. Like, I would have preferred that.
That makes sense. It's like, okay, yeah, after the fact, you can say, yeah, that was cool. We got a lot of stuff done.
Yep.
Okay. During that time, you did not feel that way.
Because everybody's worked like crazy on something. I don't want to say everybody. That's a terrible generalization. But you know, like that sense of when you've worked and worked and worked and it all came together, like there's a sense of satisfaction which, you know, you're kind of like, all right, that was part of the process. I would have rather that, I think. So we talked a little bit about, again, normally we would talk, this would be like, hey, controller toss moment. We decided to go kind of through the coolest things that we learned. So I'll open it with you. Like, what are the things that you learned that you thought were like, kind of the things that you didn't expect to learn when watching this that were kind of eye-opening?
Well, one of the things that I thought was one of the more interesting things that they kind of got into was, I mean, we all know that The Last of Us is based around kind of a fungal outbreak.
Thank you. I'm so glad we brought this. Yes, please.
That kind of comes in and starts infecting humanity.
Yep.
That evolves. And the kind of going in, I noticed throughout the game that there were definitely stages, but to have them kind of explain through those stages and kind of, you know, reinforce that it was a very well thought out kind of life cycle.
Totally. So I totally agree. So 2 things. I want to throw that up in a minute. Is that up? I think it's probably up. So this is what we're looking at is terrifying. This is my favorite thing to show at parties. This is actually a tarantula. Notice I'm not proud of that fact. I go to weird parties. This is a tarantula that's actually been infected with the cordyceps virus, and I think that is what's interesting. Neil Druckmann on the show talks a little bit about how they saw on Planet Earth. Planet Life is not a thing. Planet Earth, how they watched how that cordyceps will actually infect an ant, control that ant to walk to the top of a tree, kind of explode, and then pass down its spores to like spread spores all over the jungle below. What I didn't realize was later that they are moving up in the ecosystem and they are now controlling spiders. Terrifying. So I really loved that they'd spent that time and said, hey, look, we want to ground this in something that's like super real and like take it one more step. And how I'm going to keep coming back to that word. It is the perfect word for this documentary, but grounded, right? When they were talking about how they wanted to keep it all organic and they were going through the noises, he wanted it to still have a mouthfeel, but so they were like, again, all of it tried to be as real as possible. It wasn't some just, made up virus in a lab or something.
Right.
That's terrifying. I'm looking up. It's still terrifying.
It is. It really is.
I mean, as a tarantulas alone weren't scary enough.
Now have it being controlled by some fungus that has started with ants and is now
terrifying.
Spiders? Yeah.
So you think what was cool was kind of the life cycle of the virus, right? And they thought through that, and that's how they differentiated the enemy types.
Right.
I can get behind that.
Like that kind of insight. That's fun.
I think so too. I think I've got several, so I want to keep kind of going back and forth. One of the things that for me, one of my favorite scenes in this whole thing was, and I'll go back to that opening scene. Joel loses his daughter, and that scene got to me in a way that just most don't. And I think part of that goes to a tremendous performance by Troy Baker, who's, I think pretty well known for being an incredibly capable actor. I would assert that Joel is far and away his most interesting and most powerful role.
I think I can see that.
I mean, he's in everything, so at some point,
is, but that
for a
one
reason.
really pushes it kind of to a different place, I think, than he normally goes.
And I think one of the reasons I talk about this this game every week, and why I end up kind of coming back to it, it becomes a touch point for me because Joel and Ellie aren't my favorite video game characters, but they are the two that I tend to think about the most. Like, wonder what they're up to, like what's next. And I know we'll get to kind of that part 2 in a minute. But that scene where Troy talks about how that scene where Joel loses his daughter and how it came together, and I thought that was fascinating. How they had this first amazing scene and he crushes it, or at least he thought. Really just wept, and they show him he's openly weeping, he's crying with his daughter, and felt like it was in the can. And they did 5 or 6 more takes, 7 more takes, 8 more takes, and then they came back, and then Neil had called him again and said, I need to do that scene again. And my favorite thing about it was Troy's talking through it and his frustration with it. And at the end, he says that like this scene didn't work because of him. It worked in spite of him. It was so like egoless, right? Like it was really humbling, because I feel like a lot, again, broad generalization, but a lot of times in these documentaries or these insight pieces, they show actors, and it's actors kind of taking credit for like how well they did or whatever. And I think Joel's, it is an iconic performance. And I think that was the type of thing that you want to turn to for this. That inside baseball moment where I can see, oh, this is how this actually came together. This moving scene.
Yeah. It was a rough scene to watch.
Tough.
And I mean, the recording of it.
Yeah.
Was
yeah, when they juxtapose like the actual scene over them, and just, it looks like a long day at work. I know. I complain when I'm on too many conference calls. I not having to deal with that.
It's a lot of emotions to have to expel in one day.
What else like stood out for you as you were watching this? Like, what took you by surprise?
Took me by surprise. There were a lot of things that surprised me.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
Trying to like go through them. I mean, I can't really say the motion capture because that's not a surprise. I knew about that, but it's always just the depth of like how into it they get and how realistic they make it for the actors. Yeah, that's always kind of they like really go through. They're acting it out. They are the actors there. So that's always a really fascinating thing to see in action. And okay, so answer me this. So how do you think, I know we're not actors, but if you were, like, how do you feel like you would do in that mocap studio with the suit with the balls on, and like, do you think you'd be able to take that seriously at all? I would be a huge ball of like self-consciousness and horror, and just, I mean, the acting is not in my wheelhouse to begin with. I mean, you asked me to like read a line like as an actor, no, that's not happening. Right. I don't have that capability. I would feel really, really silly, I think. Yeah. And I don't know that I would be able to get past that. So tremendous respect for. I think it would be very weird. Have you ever acted in anything? I gotta ask. Okay, no. Not so much. I was lucky enough to do one line in a pilot at one point. I'm not an actor by trade. But they were very like, hey, you sure you got this? You got this. You sure you're good? You know, you're not an actor. You're good. I'm like, come on, it's a line. Like, I talk for a living. This shouldn't be that difficult. Got up. I was a bartender. My line was like, here's your drink, Sam. And I literally went, you're the best, Sam. And I was like, it's one line. It was one line. They're like, nope, cut. And the amount of people that have to reset when you fuck up one line, it's just like, okay, new guy. It was great. Yeah, it'd be a nightmare. Yeah, it was great. Crushed it. I was real good. Anyway, so I have a profound appreciation for what they did in really bringing these characters to life. I wanted to ask you this. It's one of those things I really dug too, and again, that comes back to a theme of this whole documentary. But like, Naughty Dog seems to be like a group of like egoless self-starters who are really committed to excellence above kind of even personal recognition. And I think the other person who kind of embodied that in this was the woman who was designing the UI. Do you remember this section? Oh my gosh. What did you think? That was interesting, right? Yeah, that was really interesting to think about because, again, one of those things you don't really think about. No. you don't expect like to be taken through, and you don't expect them to show it in a documentary.
Nope.
I mean, that's not one of those things that are traditionally interesting
Right.
to see on screen. And so the fact that, yeah, talk about one of like probably the most underappreciated jobs you could be doing, because no
Totally.
one's like, wow, man, I'm really glad that they worked this UI out
Right.
for us.
Right. Well, she
Unless you're
says it
complaining
too.
about it.
She says it. She's like, if I'm doing my job from a UI perspective, nobody even notices. And I was like, again, just no ego whatsoever.
And yet the fact, yeah, that, I mean, that was probably countless hours, but countless cups of coffee.
Yeah. Well, we can count all 7 at least that afternoon.
Easily.
Again, I love the fact that she took a moment to show us one that didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I actually, if I had one ask for this documentary, it would be really interesting to see all the character designs and even like story beats that they threw away. Like that, I think would be really cool.
I like seeing that kind of stuff.
Me too.
Like just how you got to the point that you're at,
Right.
where it came from. So, yeah, juxtaposing kind of something that didn't work.
Yes.
It's fun.
Because maybe at the end, again, this game is about the end and Joel rescuing Ellie from the Fireflies, and her asking, about what happened, right? And Joel kind of misrepresenting what happened. I'm trying to stay as spoilers. But it's just so magic. If you haven't played this and you're watching it, please look in the mirror and get your shit together, and then go play Last of Us. No, but like that game, the end is about. This game is about the end, and it would be interesting to see if, like, at one point they flirted with maybe there's a choice, or one of those types of insights. I think would have been really, really interesting. But to circle back to her UI piece, I loved that she said, "Hey, here's one that didn't work, and here's why." And again, it just came back to like how cool, because she showed a moment where she's running out, she looks to craft, and from a timing perspective, it just wasn't fun, and it caused panic around the AI, and I thought that was just so cool. Like how many countless the iterations of UI before that was that magic sweet spot.
Right. How far do you have to go to kind of, I mean, imagine how many times do you have to run that?
Right.
Like, okay, just adjust it a little bit this way, and we got to do this just a little bit, and put, do this instead, and gets.
Yeah, no,
I can't even fathom it. It's just so.
I think that's what's so cool about this documentary, though, too. There's so many, like, okay, we're looking at one little vertical slice that is UI, and we can't fathom that. And how does that fit into what is the narrative arc, and then what is the animation, and then what is the sound design, and all of that comes together in this concert that creates this just like, again, I know I'm biased, but like an unparalleled experience. I think it's such a vision. And I think anybody, I think composers on their own are kind of magic. And I think writers on their own are kind of magic. And people who can bring all of those mediums together and have it be all of those things and interactive, it's incredible to me. Like, this is real magic as far as, and technology, right? Big tech nerd, right? Like, it's all of these things. I'm
No,
you're,
go.
I'm passionate about it, but I want to.
Yeah.
Am I on my own on that? Is that like it was as interesting for you?
It was fascinating. I think another thing, kind of jumping off the UI, like the really little details when they went into the lighting effects,
Yes.
and the shadows, and like bouncing the freaking light that you see on the walls when you're flashing a flashlight. Just these crazy tiny things.
And things that don't always get, like light bounce and like subdermal, I'm gonna definitely mess this up, but subdermal refraction, right? Where light passes through the skin and then bounces back. It's one of those things that you don't really notice, but then you absolutely do when it's there.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So nobody would have faulted them if they had light bounce, because they actually show her panning with a flashlight. She hits a red object, and then light bounces back off of that, and it's a gradient of that red. And like 90% of games, especially when this came out, nobody was doing that kind of light bounce.
Just bright yellow beam.
It's
That's
bright
what you
and it
got.
bounces back. It is just
Sick.
white bouncing off, and it colors the room based on where you're actually pointing that light. And I thought that was also, it's that next level of excellence that really illustrates that Naughty Dog just are some of the best developers in the entire world. I agree.
So, yep,
I thought the lighting was really cool. I'm a big lighting nerd, so but it had spent a lot of time with that. I actually really liked hearing how the music came together and how they found I'm gonna definitely butcher his name, Santo Lalala. That's not even close.
Quite.
Not even close. But how they found, he'd said that Neil Druckmann had said that they had this folder, right? This running folder of songs. And they found that like increasingly it was just that guy in the doc, and like, well, we need a composer anyway. And loved knowing that, because I think the music is so iconic. When I think of this game, I often think back on the sounds from this game, especially the score. And literally they kind of just said, hey, here are the beats we're trying to hit. They showed him that opening scene in the documentary and said, go compose something that's tonally consistent with what we just showed you. And that's crazy to me. No?
No, it is. I like... I don't know, but music is another thing that is really hit or miss with me. Just as far as like, I have a terrible ear for music, so it's magic to me.
Totally.
It's just sheer magic to be like, wow, you like made all that noise happen, and it sounds beautiful.
What else? I know we're running a little bit lean on time, and I definitely want to get to kind of our thoughts and hopes for part 2. I want to see, is there anything else that you learned when watching this was surprising? Anything else that was just like really stood out for you in this documentary?
Well, one thing to touch on, I mean, all the research that went into, obviously with the fungus that they found to turn into a human disease, but also they went kind of in depth into looking into what would happen to the earth if humans were not there to, push it back. And how they really took that to heart and adapted that in their landscape and in their setting. And how it was not just like, oh yeah, in 20 years the world would be a little grown over. It was, no, this is what would happen, and here is why these things would happen.
I loved that too. Yeah, what was the term? He said like it was cities reclaimed, right? The nature was reclaiming those cities, and I thought that was, and the amount of work that goes into that on a daily basis to beat back vegetation, and I just,
one of those things you don't think about. And it's like, you're right. People go through huge lengths to keep things looking, trimmed and the way, like civilized, I guess, in the way that we want it.
And they do nail that aesthetic throughout the course of the game. It feels so lived in. And I know authentic is hard when it's like this post-apocalyptic world, but it feels lived in and like reclaimed and haunting in a way that like clearly they spend a lot of time paying attention to. God, there's so many really good moments in this game. I think the last thing that I wanted to mention around this documentary, which I was really intrigued just about their process as a whole, because they are literally heads and shoulders above everybody else. I think it's CD Projekt Red, the guys that did The Witcher from a narrative perspective, and then it's Naughty Dog and everybody else. It's just, those two are in a rarefied air. And so I was interested to hear their process. And one of the things I found fascinating, and I don't know who said it in the documentary, but somebody said that they have just like a level org chart, and their open criticism, right? You can criticize everybody, right? And that idea of candor generating speed, right? I can just be candid. This doesn't work. Let's get through it and move on, is something that like, I feel like a lot of corporate cultures say and very few do. And they clearly like eat, sleep, and breathe that,
Yeah, that was cool. They were like, yeah, we don't want, as someone else was saying, like right when they were talking about that, it was like, yeah, if it's bad, you tell them that it's bad.
Yeah, right.
It's like just no, and no hurt feelings, no, nothing like that. It's just like you work past it.
Let's rip the Band-Aid off. Let's get,
like, all right.
Yep. Yeah. What do you say? Like your feelings are hurt for a minute, but you get on with it, and then you go and you just deliver the best damn video games of all time.
And then you do something better and go.
So like again, this game is literally it's not literally the only. I probably played 2 or 3 games start to finish twice in my whole life. I'm usually newest, latest, best. Whatever comes out, that's typically what I want to be playing. Last of Us is the only few games that I've ever gone start to finish through multiple times. At one point, I had said like a book, like favorite books, I was just going to revisit it once a year. I think it's a little bit heavy to do that. Definitely intend to play it again at some point.
It's an intense reread.
It's a lot. But I will say, going through it a second time is kind of magic. And I know this sounds cliche, and I've used that word magic several times, but there's so many beats that you don't pick up on until you've actually finished this whole story. Like a lot of times early on, a lot of times when Joel and Ellie are still kind of finding out their footing, and even when Tess is still there, when Ellie will give him shit or start to joke with him a little bit, Joel touches his watch, which is something that at the very beginning of the game, his daughter gives him that watch, and it's cracked, but he won't take it off. And like, again, she even references the fact that your watch is cracked during the course of it. There's just so many little beats that like stick out once you know how this whole end game plays out. It's a masterpiece. It is an unmitigated masterpiece. Which brings me to part 2. Stacey.
I really want to know how you feel
Miss
about
Shuttlesworth. Not Shuttles. Shuttlesworth. So I'm conflicted. Look, I've been wanting this for a long time. And even before they announced it, I was weirdly in my head about it. Obviously, this property is near and dear to my heart. I wanted more from Joel and Ellie, but I kind of didn't. It's one of those perfect intellectual properties that had an amazing arc, and there was no need to do anything else with it. It was so self-contained. It was so I'm interested in revisiting that world. I'm revisiting to see. I want to hear more stories from Neil and Bruce and in that world, and maybe something equally as compelling. I didn't think that we needed more Joel and Ellie until I saw them. Until I saw them
and
again.
Then you were there?
I'm like, hey Joel, how you been, buddy? I missed you. So were you watching PSX live when this? I asked you that, you weren't.
I thought after the fact.
When you saw the trailer, what did you think?
It was beautiful.
It is. It is.
It is. And it was really interesting because it was kind of a decided shift in, how how their kind of morals worked in the game a little bit. So we got a lot of time to fill in for, and a lot of really, I mean, there's hopefully going to be an incredibly interesting story to tell there as to what got us to that point.
Yeah. Well, and I think
where
that
we're
was
going from there.
Well, that was interesting too, because Neil Druckmann did a PSX panel, and one of the things that he said in the panel was, he said, "Hey, look, trust us. We were very concerned about coming back and visiting Joel and Ellie, and if it wasn't the story that we wanted to tell, we wouldn't be doing that with them. But this world is so intrinsically tied to Joel and Ellie and their relationship. They felt that they had a lot more story to tell, and I kind of want to give them the benefit of the doubt."
See that, and I think they've handled it with such care. I believe that they wouldn't go back just. I mean, and yeah, I think it's pretty clear they're not going back just to do it,
right?
Or for money or for anything like that. It really does. It must be a compelling story that they've got.
It doesn't feel like a cash grab, right? Like, obviously, this is orders of magnitude more successful at this point than any Uncharted game had been. So clearly, they were going to make something else in that universe. What that was, I don't, obviously. Well, now we know a little bit.
Right.
So you saw
very little bit.
Very little bit. And they said that we're still very, very early on. We saw the trailer. Tell me, like, what was going on. Like, what did you think? You thought the trailer was beautiful. What do you hope kind of comes of this story? What do you want out of this?
See, I'm not sure, because I've seen now a couple different theories, like I have.
All right.
There's a couple. I guess there's this one I think is the more popular one, where we see the firefly symbol.
Yep.
As we're coming into their little like area where something happened. Like they've been trying to hunt down Joel and Ellie, and so they've kind of turned it around and made this like a firefly haven and are luring them in.
Yep.
And that's why she kind of seems so at home right there.
It's dark.
I mean, there's also, I don't know. See, another one, and I think people really go for like they've been separated and he's finding her again. I don't like though. I don't go for that. Kind of.
No.
I don't think that works or would work for their particular relationship.
So they've said a couple things. They've said some interesting things. So they've said that you play as Ellie, which is awesome. So they've aged her up a little bit, right? This is several years later. She's, 19, 20 years old, looks like in this trailer. She's playing guitar. And one of the things they do, they show her hand kind of shaking aggressively at the beginning, and then she calms down. And then she plays this very haunting song over some dead bodies with a head wound, just bleeding everywhere. Listen, that's a problem. And then Joel kind of walks in from this, from outside. And I thought from that trailer, one of the tone they were trying to establish is Joel's no longer with us. That I think Joel's dead.
Yes, so that was definitely one of my earlier thoughts too. And this was all happening in her head, kind of. She broke a little.
All of what was happening in your estimation? The bodies?
No. Joel being there. Joel being there.
So I totally agree with that. I think, and it kills me to say because I really always want to know what Joel's up to, and I think that makes it's an interesting thing to think about, because how does that translate to gameplay, right? Because if Joel's dead, does he stay with her as a figment of her imagination through the course of the game? Because it wouldn't make sense to play as Ellie and have Joel be the AI running around, this other big dude running around, you know what I mean? So I don't know how that translates to gameplay. It's weird because he steps in and he walks in and he says, like, I want to do my Joel impression. It's terrible. But he says, like, what are you doing, kiddo? And in The Last of Us, it's always over the shoulder, back and forth shots between the two. But they kind of put Joel in the corner of the screen and they don't veer off of him. They literally stay focused on her. We never see his face. To me, it felt like he's clearly dead and she is going to kill every last one of them, meaning the Fireflies, probably because they killed Joel, because he did some terrible things to rescue her. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a pretty convincing read of that trailer, especially with kind of the casual like question he walks in with. It's more almost like a self introspection.
Totally.
Like, oh my, like, what's going on here? Not really a reasonable, like, coming from another party.
Well, and I think the other thing, like, obviously she's dealing with some shit, right? Like, and if Joel's dead, and if she is dressed as, which somebody pointed this out to me, she's dressed as Riley from the Left Behind DLC, her partner in that. So kind of her first love when she's kind of exploring her sexuality, and Joel, the only person has really cared for and looked out for forever. I think we have an opportunity to see something really, really special. Just kind of wrapping up, Neil Druckmann said again in that panel that if the first one was about love, that this is a game about hate. And I, for one, am impossibly excited about The Last of Us Part 2. Are you kidding me?
But yeah, well, and that trailer set up a lot of hate-fueled violence.
It sure did.
To be had.
It sure did. It sure did.
Yeah.
Guys, we are running a little bit lean on time. Typically, this is a point in the show where we give something an extra life or a game over. I'll ask you about this. Do we want to see more kind of game documentaries, or was this kind of good? Was this for like what you want to see?
More for The Last of Us specifically?
Just in general.
I think it's always interesting to see kind of behind the scenes. I think it's fun, and I do think that every different franchise will have its own unique kind of story to tell and way of looking at it.
Yeah.
So we can see different things every time.
I'm all to see more Naughty Dog. It's an extra life from both of us then. Fair enough. Listen, thank you so much for joining me. I know we miss you, Mark. Come back, Mr. Donica. He's out doing some very, he's just gone rogue. Maybe one day he can tell us about it. It's a little inside. He's seeing Star Wars, guys. He's seeing Star Wars, if you didn't catch that joke.
We're not jealous or anything.
We have got, no,
fine.
not at all.
Fine.
Not at all. But it's so fine. We got to talk about one hell of a game. Stacey, where can people find you on the internet?
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Stacey Shuttles, or on Twitter, Instagram, and all over the web at Nerds Doing Stuff, where I will continue being a nerd doing stuff.
Yeah, you are. Yeah, you are. Guys, thank you so much for joining me. You can find me on Twitter at P to the Dees. I want to hear about your thoughts kind of on Last of Us. God, this is beautiful. It's so good. I also, I'm a co-owner of a company called the Project Franchise. We're a technology company. We started the first fan-run football team. We're kicking off in February 2017. Find us at projectfranchise.com. As always, you can join us here every couple of weeks here at the Popcorn Talk Network, where we talk about video game movies. So join us in 2 more weeks when we're doing what we're doing yet?
We are, I think our next one up is going to be Assassin's Creed, isn't it? That's coming out.
All right, so either way, we will let you know on Twitter. Thank you so much for staying with us. Go watch Grounded, and we'll see you in a couple weeks.
From producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the entire Popcorn Talk Network, we would like to thank you for tuning in. For questions or comments, be sure to visit popcorntalk.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of the Popcorn Talk Network.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Popcorn Talk Network or its owners and principals.
'Cause I know I'll kill my enemies when they come.